Hello guys, today we're going to talk about BMAT Section 2. As you know, it's pretty much end of UCAT season, and the next test for you Oxbridge applicants is going to be the BMAT.
Yes, so BMAT Section 2 lasts 30 minutes and it consists of 27 questions. So that's a minute per question, but it's still time pressured. I would say it's probably the section that most medics enjoy doing more, although this year, well, in the year we did it, people were complaining about it being very difficult, so it can be very difficult too.
And now we're just gonna go straight in with our advice. So tip number one is to start at the earliest convenience you can. And for some people this might be right after the UCAT, if they have time during summer and in September, but for most people it might be in mid-October, so right after you sent off your UCAS application.
Yeah. And now we'll talk about some resources you can use to prepare. So for those of you early birds out there, if you really start early, then you can get through the BMAT papers quite quickly. So then you might want to start looking at some other alternatives. I would recommend the NSA. These have slightly harder scientific knowledge and applications questions, and also the IMAT too. The IMAT questions are more like the sort of difficulty BMAT produces. So those are some resources for you. Hopefully they won't run out. If they do run out, then you can go to the paid preparation resources. But honestly, like if you just go through all the BMAT questions, you'll be more than prepared, because since 2003, every single year there's been a paper. Okay,
so what we say to you is to emphasize the physics specification. So not all medics will take physics for A-level. Most people have just done it for GCSE. So as it's not as fresh in your mind, you probably want to go through the physics spec, maybe the old GCSE physics CUP guide, and just revise it. But also I'd advise going through the whole spec as well. So Cambridge, what was the company called? I don't know, but
yeah, they provide a visual specification which we can link down below.
Yeah, so they've got a spec of literally all the top, so all the content, all the topics they could potentially ask them.
Yeah, and the focus is on being able to apply the questions. So you may know the knowledge and that's really good, but you need to actually apply them to past papers, which is why we say do as many as you can.
Yeah, there's actually no reason just revising, spend all your time revising from books.
Yeah, so particularly for the maths, physics and chemistry questions, we would say that proficiency in your mental maths, your algebra skills, things like that, they're really important, because you don't get a calculator and you have a time limit of 1 minute to do rather long multi-step calculations, which can be time pressuring. So make sure your mental maths is up to scratch, you're able to do the basic operations in your head quickly.
Okay, so in terms of the actual scores you need for the BMAT, there's nothing to really stress over or lose sleep over, because especially if you're applying to Cambridge, which is sort of less BMAT focused, you only need around 5 or 6 in your BMAT to be considered for interview, and the interview is really the main deciding factor whether or not you get a place at Oxbridge. But obviously at Oxford, you need to aim slightly higher because things are a bit more competitive. So around 6s, maybe 7s.
And I would add that for Cambridge, even though the BMAT isn't used heavily in selecting for interview, or as heavily at Oxford anyway, don't skimp out on it, because at the end of the day they take into account everything. And if you're placed next to a candidate with exactly the same academics but a slightly higher BMAT score, you know who's going to get the offer. So
not you.
Yeah. Unfortunately. So just make sure you're in the top sort of decile, or like whatever you want to say for your cohort. Definitely aim for 7 and above, I would say, to be really outstanding.
So Another tip for section 2 is to be careful with your timing. So this is where people often most struggle with section 2. If you gave someone like infinite time and ask them to answer those questions, you know, without the internet or anything, they could probably still get 100%. But the main thing is trying to get those questions as fast as possible. So just skim reading everything and really just practicing with those past papers how to manage your time. So if you don't get it within, was it 1 minute per question, or was it less than that?
Just over a minute.
Okay, so yeah, so around a minute. So just skipping it and moving on.
And also, our last tip is just to be really careful with the wording of the question. They sometimes trip you up with negatives, so what's not, and they also give some qualifiers in the question. So maybe they tell you, assume this is the case, or they tell you maybe the cells are placed in water in the dark or whatever. So do be careful of little details like that, which could affect your answer as well. And that's really all there is to say about section 2. It's one of the better sections, one of the easier ones to prepare for, and medics generally know what to expect. So our best advice is just to prepare as much as possible, do as many past papers as possible, and hopefully you should come up with a very good score.
Yep.
So we'll see you in the next BMAT video.